A salamander gets its arm bitten clean off by a predator. Give it a few weeks, and it just grows a new one. Bones, muscle, nerves, skin, no scar, fully functional, wiggling its new fingers like nothing happened. Now picture a human losing a finger. Best case, with incredible medical care, you get a scar. We share the same basic body plan as this animal. Same bones in roughly the same places. Same kind of blood. Same kind of nerves. So why does one of us get a free replacement limb and the other gets a very expensive bandage? I expected the answer to be something simple. Like, salamanders just have a special gene we don't. What I actually found was that your body might not be unable to do this, but that it might be refusing to. So, let's start where I started. With the one animal that made this whole question worth asking. How does a salamander pull this off? There's a structure called a blastema. When an axolotl loses a limb, cells near the wound don't just start dividing. They partially forget what they were. A muscle cell stops acting like a muscle cell. A skin cell stops acting like a skin cell. They pile up into a small mass at the injury site, and from there they rebuild, in order, into a brand new limb. Researchers have described it almost like rebuilding a factory after an earthquake. Debris gets cleared first. That's the immune system doing cleanup. Then, specialized crews move in. One team lays down bone, one builds muscle, one threads through blood vessels, one rewires nerves. Piece by piece, until the whole structure is standing again, fully wired, fully working, and it's not sloppy. It's not a rough draft of an arm. That's the local repair job. Except it turns out that's not actually what's happening. I assumed regeneration was a wound site event. Damage happens, nearby cells respond, done, contained, local. Like a splinter. Then, a 2025 study found that when an axolotl loses a limb, the signs of that injury show up almost everywhere in its body. Not just at the wound, limbs that were never even touched light up with the same molecular signals. The animal's entire system seems to know something happened, and if an axolotl loses a second limb shortly after the first, it regrows that one faster. Like the whole animal had already gone on alert and preloaded the resources for round 2, just in case. So, what's coordinating something body-wide like that? Researchers traced part of it back to adrenaline, the same fight-or-flight chemical your body dumps when you're scared. Somehow, in the axolotl, that same chemical seems to help prepare cells throughout the body for regeneration before the actual rebuilding even starts. And because humans have that exact same adrenaline system, this isn't a purely salamander trick. We might already have some of the hardware sitting in us, unused. We just don't know how to switch it on the same way. An axolotl doesn't just regrow a limb, it regrows the correct amount of limb. Lose the whole arm, you get a whole new arm. Lose only a fingertip, you get only a new fingertip. Somehow, the blastema knows exactly how much to build and exactly where to stop. Researchers eventually found part of the mechanism behind that, a set of genes that function almost like a blueprint, plus an enzyme that fine-tunes exactly how much of the limb needs to be reconstructed. It's not a vague grow something here instruction. It's precise, down to the joint. One scientist who'd spent decades studying this admitted he used to be skeptical humans could ever do this. After the discovery, he said, "Now we have the blueprint, and we have the genes to grow a limb. That's a big claim to make out loud. So I went looking for whether humans have any version of that blueprint left in us somewhere. Before I get to the human part, it's worth pausing on something. This isn't as simple as some animals regenerate and some don't. There's a huge range, and humans sit near the bottom of it, which honestly stung a little to learn. At the extreme end, you've got flatworms called planarians. Cut one into pieces, and multiple pieces can each grow into a complete separate worm. Salamanders are nowhere near that extreme, but they're still the only vertebrates, animals with a backbone like us, that can regrow a fully functional limb. Lizards get partial credit. They can regrow tails, but if you look closely, it's not the same tail. It's usually a cartilage rod instead of a proper stack of vertebrae. And then there's an animal I hadn't even heard of before this rabbit hole, the African spiny mouse. It can lose huge sections of its own skin. Researchers have documented it losing something like 60% of the skin on its back, and grow it back with hair, glands and all, no scarring. Some species can even shed patches of skin on purpose to escape a predator's grip, the way a lizard drops its tail. So somewhere on that spectrum, worms that regrow their entire body, salamanders that regrow whole limbs, lizards that regrow an approximation of a tail, mice that regrow huge patches of skin, humans sit almost at the very bottom. Fingertips in children for a few years. Which brought me back to the real question, why there? Why only that? Human fetuses, for a window early in pregnancy, heal cuts completely scar-free. Then that window closes sometime before birth, and the scarring program takes over for the rest of your life. It doesn't fully stop there either. Young children can sometimes regrow the very tip of a finger, just the last few millimeters past the nail. This has been documented in clinical case reports going back decades. And the ability quietly fades as the child gets older, until one day it's just gone. So the question flipped on me at this point. It stopped being, why can't humans regenerate? And became something closer to, why does this ability get switched off piece by piece as we grow up? A 2026 study asked a very specific version of this question. Why does only the very tip of a finger regrow, while the rest of the same finger can't? The answer centered on a molecule already sitting in your bathroom cabinet, if you own moisturizer: hyaluronic acid. Tissue, with more of it in the material surrounding the cells, regenerated more successfully. Tissue with less of it just defaulted to a scar, so humans didn't lose the ability to regenerate. We turned the dial almost all the way down and left it flipped on in one tiny spot for a few short years, in a place small enough that whatever risk comes with it is easy to manage. If the switch still technically exists somewhere in us, why would our own body choose to keep it turned off almost everywhere else for almost our entire life? Now imagine two people, Bob and Alice, both lose a hand in the same accident. Bob's body does what every adult human body does: inflammation, clotting, immune cells rushing in, and eventually scar tissue seals the wound shut. Permanent. His cells stop dividing once it's closed, and they stay stopped. Alice's body, in this hypothetical, does something closer to what a salamander does. Cells at the wound forget what they were, start dividing fast and begin rebuilding layer by layer, the way a blastomer would. Sounds like Alice wins that trade, right? Except cells that divide rapidly while ignoring the body's normal stop growing now signal already have a name in medicine: a tumor. The exact kind of cells you'd need to rebuild an arm look alarmingly similar to the kind of cells that become cancer. Both are cells that have been told, one way or another, to stop listening to the rules and just keep multiplying. There's a real, long-studied strain of lab mice that proves this connection isn't just theory. These mice can punch a hole clean through their own ear, and it heals with no scar and full cartilage regrowth. Almost a mammal doing salamander-style repair in miniature. Researchers traced part of that ability to a gene called P21, a brake that normally stops cells from dividing out of control. In these particular mice, that brake is loosened, but only right at the wound. P21 has a much more famous relative, P53. The gene, sometimes nicknamed the guardian of the genome, because its entire job every day, in every one of your cells, is stopping damaged cells from turning into tumors. So the same breaks that are likely keeping your cells from regrowing a limb are, quite possibly, some of the same breaks keeping your cells from turning cancerous. Evolution may not have forgotten how to regrow limbs in mammals. It may have looked directly at the risk and decided against it on purpose, because a salamander in a pond can gamble on loosened growth control in a way that a human trying to survive 80+ years simply can't afford to. Scientists still don't fully understand every piece of this puzzle. Once I understood the trade-off, the next question was obvious. Could we ever get around it? Some of the more serious research money in regenerative medicine right now is aimed at exactly this. Not how do we grow a limb in a jar, but how do we get the benefits of regeneration without opening the door to cancer? That's a much harder problem than it sounds, because you're not looking for one switch to flip. You're looking for a way to loosen the brakes just enough, just locally, just temporarily, and then reapply them the second the job is done. Nobody has cracked that yet, not for a human limb. But it's worth sitting with how different that sentence is from where this field stood not that long ago. Can't we just gene edit our way back to this? People are trying, but it looks like human cells might not be able to forget what they are the same way axolotl cells do. It's not one switch. It's a whole coordinated process spread across the entire body, and we're still mapping the basic wiring of it. Is this just underfunded science that's about to get solved any day now? Partly funding, sure, but even the researchers closest to this work are cautious. Human limb regeneration is likely far off, and regrowing something as large and complicated as an adult arm could plausibly take years, not weeks, even once the underlying biology is fully understood. If cancer is really the risk, shouldn't regenerating animals be full of tumors? You'd think so, but it's messier than that in practice. Some of these regenerating mice look tumor-friendly in certain ways and unusually resistant in others at the same time. Scientists still don't fully understand why, and that inconsistency alone tells you this isn't a solved problem. So, will this ever actually happen for humans? Most researchers in this space would say, plausible eventually, not close right now. So next time someone jokes about wishing they could regrow a limb like a lizard's tail, tell them your body could probably still do a rough draft of that. Maybe evolution never forgot how to regrow an arm. Maybe it just chose you instead.